Okay. Now you should be receiving the audio. How about that? Is the audio working now? I love these things. When you do live presentations, it's the greatest thing in the world. The audio works or it doesn't? Yes, the audio is working. Thank you so much for the feedback. Hi, I am Al Paul. I'm one of the support analysts. I've probably chatted with you usually more successfully over the last few years. And I appreciate you coming out today to what we hope is a series of helpful webinars. And first of all, we'll get rid of some of the mundane housekeeping, which is we're going to keep you folks in mute today because the audio really does work better. Questions will be handled after the session, not during. If you have a question, email it to our support staff. It usually ends up in my basket, which is great. And that way, by emailing us the questions, you guys are helping us manage any questions that you might have and helps us ensure that we follow up properly. We are recording this session today. You are lucky. It is audio only and what I put up on the PowerPoint. Still no webcam on my end, so you'll just get the audio and the presentation. You can link to it from the usual spot, community.schoollogic.com. For our demonstration purposes today, we are running the latest, greatest version of SchoolLogic, which is 4.1.6, in front of database 2.2.363. And a quick side note to my friends running SchoolLogic. SchoolLogic and TeacherLogic should work in any of the modern browsers, Safari, Firefox, Chrome, Internet Explorer. Myself, I tend to use IE. You will be seeing me run today in IE 11. To be totally honest, and I got blindsided by IE 11. I ran too many Windows updates without checking what they really were, and my machine catapulted from like IE 9 to IE 11 without me realizing it. You'd expect somebody in the tech industry to pay a little more attention, wouldn't you? The only reason I bring this up is because we've seen some abnormalities in IE 11, particularly in regards to reports and our report manager. If you think that something's goofy in this area, then the answer to that is community. It's not called community. The answer to that is what's IE call it? IE calls it compatibility. That's what it is. IE calls it compatibility. And if you go to the Tools menu and you go to Compatibility View Settings, not Community, you'll see here that in Compatibility View Settings, I've already put in localhost and I've already put in MIG-PC. These are the two websites, if you will, from which my information gets disseminated. So one way to tell if you need to do that is if you come in here and these guys don't pop down, if the menus don't pop down, it's time to go to compatibility settings. And you saw me do it. You just go to Tools, you pick Compatibility View. I will tell you up front there are two things I don't like about this. One is that I have to do it at all. And number two is that it seems to me the only way you can get IE to actually store the settings is you have to turn off the preference that deletes your browsing history upon close. So if you go to Tools and you go to Internet Options, there's this ability right here to delete browsing history on exit. You'll see I have disengaged that. That allows me to store the fact that I want to use compatibility view settings when I go into the SchoolLogic stuff. Otherwise, I found I was having to do that like every day when I went back in there. So I didn't find that to be particularly attractive because IE was not retaining my settings. Hey, you want to have some fun? Tell you what, 3 black Suburbans enter your school parking lot. No, really, seriously. And okay, they're probably not firing at you, but they are definitely heavily armed. And 2 guys jump out of each truck, suits, ties, sunglasses, wrist radios, earpieces, the whole bit, okay? They marshal around your desk. President of the United States make an appearance at your school, in your district at least. The President of the United States been bitten by a snake. The agents have learned that there's a senior in your high school who has already been accepted into the University of Wisconsin School of Veterinary Medicine for next year. The kid keeps snake venom antidote in his locker, but they don't have the kid's name. All they can tell you is that he's a member of both your baseball team and your student council. They want his name, they want his locker number, they want these pieces of information now. You could whip up a user-defined report, more on that later, or you could modify an existing user-defined group, maybe to group by baseball and student council. Let's jump into SchoolLogic and do that because these guys are not getting any more patient. If I go to user-defined groups, and it'll take me a second for SchoolLogic to make the leap there to the user-defined group. The first time that I do this on these demonstrations, believe it or not, I actually do run through these before I do them live for you folks. The first time I go in here, this always takes a minute, and I'm not quite sure why. You see on the top on the left, it's telling me it's waiting. Here we go. Now, my deal is this. I'm going to add, and I'm going to create a new, we're going to call it Baseball Today. Okay? I need to know whether this kid is a baseball player. I need to know whether he is on my student council, because those are the only two pieces of information I have to work with. I need both of those answers to be yes. And I need it to be true for both things. He needs to be baseball and student council. I'm going to go ahead and submit that. And we're going to edit that just a little bit because we don't want to start with history students. We want to start, we know the student is currently enrolled. I'm going to go back out to my list of kids, and I'm going to pick a different user-defined group. We're going to let that build in. The process here was I was waiting for the kid to build in behind. When I say baseball today, boom, here's my kid, Brian Bogusevic. Okay, I give this locker number right here to my little friends in black, and they walk away. Okay, we have saved the day. Why? Because we were able to make a user-defined group, which, believe me, is faster than making a user-defined report, and we were able to get these guys the information that they wanted, which isn't that the whole idea behind the student information system? We want to get the information we want, and we want to get it when we need it. Okay. Brian Bogusevic, by the way, is in fact a Major League Baseball player and did in fact attend one of our client high schools. Real world stuff, man. I'm telling you. You can't go wrong with real world stuff. Now, even though we were just talking about a high security situation involving Secret Service, President of the United States, you will be pleased to know that security for groups is not very involved. In fact, let's go back to that user-defined group for a second. We are logged in as administrative people. We're going to go, meaning we're district people. We're going to go to user-defined groups. Now, notice on the right-hand side that some of these groups say high school, and one of them here says intermediate. That's because these groups were built by building people, building operators. On the other hand, rookie drivers, SPED, and my two baseball ones up here, they were built by district operators. So I've got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got 7 user-defined groups. I'm going to log out. I'm going to log back in as a high school person. Watch what happens. Okay. When I come in here, notice I'm a high school person now. My login area tells me that. When I come down here and I pick user-defined groups, I don't see 7 anymore. I only see 6 of them. The one that disappeared is the one that was made by the intermediate school secretary. Okay? So the main thing to remember is if a building user creates a group, it is only visible to her building. If a district user creates a group, it's visible to everybody. Okay? Pretty straightforward stuff. There is not much security to set up. Now, in the example, we used a user-definable group because the systems groups didn't meet our needs. And you guys know the system groups, right? There's currently enrolled, there's history students, there's outside students. okay? And then there's other things where I can go by grade and by homeroom, and all those are groups, right? Well, in SchoolLogic, you can create a user-defined group when those system choices don't meet our needs. Now, obviously, the Secret Service coming to your office is probably a one-time thing. Myself, I only got to drive in one Secret Service motorcade, and that's when we were moving this guy right here, then candidate Paul Ryan. We were moving him to a campaign appearance, and I got to drive a van with the Secret Service. This is my agent right here. This guy was riding shoddy in my one-ton window van, okay? Underneath his jacket, we believe he had a short submachine gun. We're not really sure, but it does bring a new meaning to the term riding shoddy. Now, why does that matter? Because it allows me to literally illustrate the concept of a one-time occurrence. And I want to contrast that with how I think you should set yourself up with respect to user-defined groups. When you make a user-defined group in the real world, you probably want to set yourself up not so much for the one-time thing as for groups that recur. For instance, do you do a report on athletes every week for eligibility? Then create a user-defined group which would make them easy to pull up en masse and run a report. Remember, the main reason we create user-defined groups is to bunch these kids together. We want to make them easily accessible in Group Manager. Maybe because you need to edit something about them, or maybe because you need to report on them. You either have to come up with a series of possibilities based on existing pieces of information, you know, based on existing the quadrant or the city he lives in or something else like that. Or you have to create new user-defined fields which would allow you to group your students. In my last example, baseball and student council were what? They were user-defined fields. And I searched on the combination of both of those. Now, the other thing I could have done with those agents hanging around my desk is I could have made a user-defined report. That's the second point of this slide. Now, why did my developers give us user-defined reports? Because we knew that you would want more. Developers have built many reports into SchoolLogic. There's attendance reports, there's grade reports, there's health reports, just to name a few. Well, what happens when those reports don't meet your needs? We saw with user-defined groups, currently enrolled, history, outside students didn't meet our needs. So we created our own. Same with the reports. If the stock reports my developers gave you don't meet your needs, you can create user-defined reports. When we needed something that went outside of system groups, we went to user-defined groups. When you need something that you want that's outside of the normal reports, user-defined reports. Whether you track the data in a system field, like city, street, quadrant, all those things, grade, homeroom, those are all system fields. Or if you track the information in a user field, maybe Aboriginal or hair color or make of car, if you track the data, you can report on it. In some cases, you might be talking about calculated fields like attendance or get age. Get age is kind of cool because you can print your student's age as of today. Now, the second point on this slide, to make the unique reporting and exporting needs of not just each school, but each operator. Okay? In the second sentence, I want to emphasize this word exporting. Because collectively, software makers like SchoolLogic and our parent company, SRB, which makes a variety of software for schools, collectively, we'd like to get to a single point of entry. So you enter your student's name and their basic information once, and it would propagate to us, to your library software, to your transportation software, wherever. But we're not there yet. With a user-defined report, you could export pieces of information for your student You can certainly control the order of the fields, and then you hope the other package, transportation, library, whatever, is capable of import. Now, I did exactly that with a client live at one of our worldwide user group meetings. This is way cool. In fact, let's go look at user-defined reports. Let's get in there. Okay, the first thing we'll talk about is user-defined report security. And to start there, we're really going to go to lookup tables, and we're going to pick user-defined report groups. Let's go here. UDR groups. Do we want to make templates for only one building, or do we want them to be shared between buildings? And so at a very, very basic level, we have to make some decisions up front. And we decide what I like to call either by building or by role, okay? If we are going, and my security here is set up for both, because guess what? I have to be able to explain both. If you decide that you want your user-defined groups to be defined by building, you're going to see things like high school group, middle school group, elementary group. You know, possibly each building would have its own group. If you're going to decide that I want this to be set up by role, then you're going to see things like a role of just my high school secretaries, or maybe all of my secretaries, or maybe all of my principals, okay? So you kind of have to decide, am I going to make a template or have other people make templates, and they're going to be shared all across the district by role, typically. Okay, all my secretaries tend to have reports that do the same things. All my principals want reports that do the same things. Or am I going to have my stuff organized by group? Here's my high school reports, here's my middle school reports, here's my elementary reports. So the security begins in the lookup tables. We showed you that. There are two broad theories that I espoused, by building or by role. Remember that if you set up a user-defined report group as a building person, only staff from that building can access those reports. Well, unless you're a district user. If you choose this role-based group, all my secretaries are going to have similar reports. The district view of that is this. If you're a district user and you're tasked with making a template for all the secretaries in all the buildings, make those templates as a district user and then store them in the secretaries group. All the secretaries will be able to access them if their security setting allows that. And you might even want to consider making those templates read-only, because if you make them read-only, the secretaries can use them but can't mess with them. And if you're a district user tasked with creating a bunch of templates for other folks to use, you would probably appreciate the fact that they're not messing with them. All you want them to do is run it. Now, the building view of these role-based groups goes like this. If a principal makes a report which he wants other principals to use, and if he stores it in principals, that's great, except other principals will not be able to see it. The principal must store it in others. And we'll show you where others is in user-defined reports in a minute. Or you would assign your principal a district login, then he can store it in this principals group and other people can see it. Why? Because he created it using a district login. It's pretty common for your heavier users to have multiple logins. Not uncommon. School-based groups. If you're a school user, you will see your school reports, and you'll see district reports which your group's security allows. If you're a district user, hey, you'll see all the reports. Today, I'm going to be a district user. Now, we'll close out with a couple final thoughts here before we actually go hands-on in this. One thought is, If you give your school users read and modify to the appropriate reporting group, maybe you do that. You give them read, modify, but then you give them only read access to your district reports. So I'm a high school principal, right? I've got read and modify rights to my principal's group of reports, but district reports, maybe I can only read only. I could see a school district setting themselves up with 3 district folders. One is a general one, maybe it's read only. One which only my district users can see, that's my second folder, that's kind of cool. And then maybe your third folder is just for export templates. You could have a read-only folder within each group if you wish, but it could be overkill. You guys have to decide which makes most sense for you. Now, we're going to go hands-on here in just a second. If groups have already been created in your lookup tables, let's go to group security and assign some rights. Let's go look at that. So my groups have already been set up. Okay. Now, if I go to Setup and I go to Group Security, take me just a second for the display to catch up with that. Look at this. If I go to Teachers and I go to User-Defined Report Security, notice my teachers have no access. We're not going to have teachers running user-defined reports at this district. Now, if I go to my principals group, my principals have read, modify, and delete access to almost everything, except remember my district shared folder? The principals have only read access to that. So they can get to these reports that I've made at a district level, but they can't edit them. The same thing with reports that high school secretaries make. My principals can only read those, okay? My secretaries, I have a fair amount of trust in my secretaries. In user-defined report security, I've given them read, modify, delete access to almost everything, except maybe for those principals reports. And remember those district shared reports I have, don't want secretaries editing those, okay? So with a little forethought up front, you would have gone into lookup tables and you would create your groups. Do I want to group my templates by building or by role? And then once you decide that and you create your groups here, you come to Setup, you come to Group Security, you come to User-Defined Report Security, and establish it. Let's go look at the actual reports. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we get to the fun part of this presentation. And it's only taking me about 20 minutes to get here. Let's go look at user-defined reports. Let's start with the basics. Excuse me, always a good place to start with the basics. Let's choose, doesn't really matter which report we choose. A lot of these people don't have many. Look, here's a high school report. Okay, now, I would come in here to create a new one, and I would amazingly enough click Create New. I would name my report, pick a font, pick a report format, pick a color. These are all pretty self-explanatory, okay? I only get, at this time, I only get one font for the whole report, okay? Report format, he's kind of important. How do you want the report to come out? Most people, most of the time, will choose PDF here, okay? I want to point out the 2 export methods. I can export things as Excel, or I could export things as CSV. If you choose as Excel, here, let me show you what I'm talking about. I can pick Excel or I can pick CSV if I'm making something where I want to export my data. If you pick as Excel, you get output that has linked forms in Excel. And you'd have to unlink the forms to edit your data in Excel if that's your goal, is to edit the data. So I usually choose CSV. If I'm going to export something, I choose CSV. Comma delimited. It's raw data. Most machines will open that in Excel, which saves a step. I like CSV. Over here on the right side, report type. Now, most people, most of the time, choose report, which is a basic report in columns. The cool choices, and I promise I will show you these to you later, are chart reports and pivot reports. And a pivot report is better known in Excel as a pivot table. Layout, hey, do I want landscape or portrait? Pretty self-explanatory. And then I get to start actually making some choices here. Student group. This means when I make a user-defined report, what's my out of group? So we're going to say here that I want to report on kids out of currently enrolled. Here are my other choices. All current year students, withdrawn students, history students, whatever. It is important to realize that in its current version, user-defined reports is entirely centered around students. It starts with kids. We don't yet, but we're working on, we don't yet have the ability to do a report that's exclusively about your teachers. You got to go through the kids to get to the teachers. Okay? So you start with a student group. What's my out of? Most people, most of the time, start with currently enrolled. Okay? Report group. Now, report group is important because this tells me where to store the template. Do I want to store it within one of my groups? Okay? Remember, I'm the high school user right now, so I only have access to the high school group and to this role of principals folder over here, or I can pick others. And others is like the universal way to save stuff. Okay? Now, if I go ahead and click Next, this is where I'm going to say which elements do I want in my report. So really, really important stuff here, really, really basic stuff. Think of these as folders or directories, and I simply open my student directory and I check which pieces of information I want. Once I've got them checked, I click here and magically they appear over here. This is where I am making the choices to send stuff into the report. Now, look for a minute at last name and first name. See how the last name field length is 50? Who's got 50 characters in their student name? Okay, I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to say I only want 20 characters. And then I click on Update Field Length, and I have just cut down. Now, what's really interesting is I've done two things. I've cut down in the actual report that comes out. I'm going to limit my last name student to 20 characters. Okay, so if I've got 17 characters, I'm good. If I've got 21 characters, that kid's name is going to get truncated. But I am also cutting down the amount of space left to right for the header. The computer wants to say last name hyphen student. It wants to make that my header. I don't need all that. I really only need about 9 characters. Here's 4 characters, here's 4 characters, and there's a character in the middle. Okay? So it's important to realize that when you come in here and you start editing the field length, you're not only editing the field length of the actual output, you're also editing the field length of the headers. And then there's this little guy called include field. What's he about? So I mean, kind of on the self-explanatory level, look, if I've made the conscious decision to pick something, to bring it over here and have it end up here, notice everything defaults to yes, by the way. As soon as I bring it over, it means yes, as in yes, I'm going to include this on my report. But I can come in here and I can turn that off because I highlighted an area, it was yes, I clicked include field, and now it's going to be no. Now, why would I ever do that? Because if I want to sort by grade level, in this case it's grade, or if I want to do a pivot table or some kind of other report, meaning by other report I mean maybe a bar graph or a pie graph, that includes grade, if I want it in the report, it has to be yes. But if I want to sort by it or somehow filter by it, it has to be here, and if I don't want it in a report, I just say no. Some folks say if you're going to filter on a field, take it off the actual report. It should be simple enough for smart people to figure out the kid's grade, for example. I don't know. A lesser-known fact is that if you fail to choose a sort order, next page, sort order, pretty basic stuff here. If I want to sort by grade, grade started out over here, I highlight it, I click OK, and it comes over here. Will user-defined reports do multi-layer sorts? Yes, it will. Okay? Now, a lesser-known fact is that if I fail to choose a sort order, the system will pick the first item in my list. What was the first item in my list? ID number. And that's what it will sort the output by. Okay? If I go to the next page, this is easily the single most confusing page of setting up a user-defined reports, but it is really, really important. Okay? This is my filter page. This is where I'm going to control. Remember we started out with currently enrolled kids, right? This is where I'm going to control which of those currently enrolled kids show up on my report. So I'm going to add here, and I'm going to say I want grade. Okay? This gives me the ability to filter by grade level. Maybe I only want my 10th graders. Okay? Right now, if I click Finish and I go and I print this, I am going to get only 10th graders on my report. On the other hand, maybe I want to filter by gender, and I maybe only want girls. Okay? Now, what's really, really important and takes some practice, and I just advocate trial and error. When you have more than one filter, you need to join them. And you need to join them. You get lots and lots of choices because you can make this really, really complicated if you want to. I have like 26 minutes left. We are not going to make this really, really complicated. I chose and. So right now, I'm saying the grade is equal to 10 and the gender is equal to female. What am I going to get? I'm only going to get girls in the 10th grade. Okay? Because I joined them by and. If I join them by or, now let's consider this. My output has to be in the 10th grade or be a female. I'm a high school person, right? I got grades 9, 10, 11, and 12. Here's what I'm going to get. I'm going to get 10th graders of both genders. Why? Because I said or. That means a student only has to equal one of these two lines. A male 10th grader qualifies for this report because he's a 10th grader. Or my gender is equal to female. I will get 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade females. Why? Because they only have to qualify for one line, and as long as they're a female and they're currently enrolled, they're on the report. Okay? It is that simple, and yet it's that complex because I can make this really, really interesting by applying parentheses, and I can have 6 or 8 of these clauses. Okay? Operator is very interesting because operator varies according to what you choose. So you notice for grade, I only get not equal to, in, or equal to. As opposed to, look at my list of operators for first name. Greater than or less than, less than. By the way, less than tower. Okay? What this means, what less than means in the context of a name, it means give me, you know, let's go with a more realistic first name like Thomas. I was thinking I had last name there. Okay, first name is less than Thomas. In other words, it is alphabetically before Thomas. It's less than T in the alphabet. Okay, pretty simple, but it's interesting that this operator changes. It's context sensitive is what my friends in development would probably call that. There's also this cool thing about Ask Me Later. So let's suppose that I wanted to have a report that was flexible enough it would not give me 10th graders every time I sat down at the computer. Maybe I want it to let me pick. Okay? What this does is it creates for me the opportunity that I'm going to choose when I sit down to run the report. Today I want 10th graders. Tomorrow I maybe want 9th graders. Ask Me Later lets me choose my filter almost on the fly. What's our next screen? Okay, the group screen. This will count in our next run through, but let me tell you what this is about. Here, I get to choose, am I going to do some math on my report? Maybe I'm going to count my kids. Maybe I'm going to do a sum. Okay, we'll come back to this later, but it's a cool screen because it actually gets wonder of wonders, math out of your computer. And then the storage screen is important because the storage screen, most people most of the time choose user-defined query tool, and that means that your template, if you will, your report that you're building will get stored over here. I advocate that. It's easily organized. It's easy to know where they all are. There's no confusion about where are my user-defined reports. On the other hand, you can tell the computer to add this to a menu, okay? I can create my own user-defined reports, and I can add them to menu items out here away from user-defined reports. From a security standpoint, that might be kind of nice because you wouldn't have to give people access to user-defined reports in order to use them. On the other hand, it makes your menus a little cruddy, in my opinion, and by cruddy I mean busy. So maybe not the greatest answer, but it's an opportunity. It's a choice that you guys get to make. Now, I want to be a person who can explain to you the screen I didn't go on a minute ago, which is that group screen, and I said we get to count. Now, a couple things I've changed here. I'm going to show you a different report. One teaching moment is this. Remember I talked about Ask Me Later? That's what's been done here. This is what Ask Me Later looks like. When I run this report, I'm going to get to say, you know what, I don't want high school, I want middle school, okay? I need to log out here quick. I'm in here as a high school person, and I need to be back in here as my district person, or else I can't show you what I really want to show you here. So let's let this wind in, and I'm going to come here. I'm going to say user-defined reports, and I'm going to pick the same report. Now, however, I have access to all these little controls down here, most interesting of which, of course, was edit. What I wanted to show you is, notice this is how they set it up. They checked Ask Me Later, and it came out the way I showed you. Now, here's where I get to do the counting, okay? And I will show you a very, very simple count report, but I assure you the same principles I show you today apply to more complicated reports. Now, I've got grade here, and I've got gender. You must include the item you wish to aggregate, okay? What I mean by that is, back here, where I was turning stuff on and off on this screen, if I'm going to count something, I have to say yes to it here, okay? Once I get those guys turned on, I come back here. Now, my question number one is, do I want to include this in the header? I'm going to say yes, okay? I'm going to display, first of all, up here, I'm going to display both my header and my footer, and I've chosen contrasting colors because it makes it easy for the examples to come up with. For you guys to see it out there, it makes it easier with contrasting colors. So I display header, I display footer, anytime that I'm messing with counting. Now, I'm going to display grade in the header because it helps me organize things, okay? It helps me organize my output. I'm going to include grade in the footer. Why? Because this is my actual count. It goes in the footer. And I'm going to page break on each grade level. Now, the computer asks me, what kind of math do I want to do? And I want to count. There are some other opportunities for you to sum. We won't sum today. We will be happy to just count, okay? There's also an average opportunity, but those only make sense. This guy here will always only make sense for the item you've chosen. It's context sensitive. Since grade, in other words, students, can only be counted, we're going to go there, and it doesn't give us the opportunity to either average or sum. Okay? Once you pick a field, like let's say grade, as your aggregator, meaning your counter, if you will, this is no longer going to print on the actual report, which is another reason that you want to print in your header. Okay? I'm going to finish this. Takes a second for the post back to all happen. Now I'm going to run my report. What am I going to get here? I'm starting with currently enrolled kids. They have to be from the high school. Remember, I'm a district person. I can report on the whole blessed district if I wish, but I'm going to say, no, I just want the high school kids, and I want you to give me a grade, a count by grade, and just as a bonus, we're going to get a count by gender as well. Okay, here's my output. Remember, I said contrasting colors, it helps me see things. Notice that the whole thing, legal last name student, didn't come out. Okay, where's the ENT? Well, the ENT in student got truncated. Why? Because I took that last name and I said, I don't want 50 characters, I want a smaller number of characters. So when you guys go review this presentation later, you can figure out how many characters I kept. I've got grade 9 females. And I'm just going to scroll through my grade 9 females. I'm still only on the P's. Oh, look, there's 87 of them. Okay? So we're counting. We know that there are 87 grade 9 females. I told it make me a page break. So here's my next page. And now I go on to grade 9 males. Watch what happens when I get to the bottom of my grade 9 males. I get two numbers. Number one is I get my gender count. But remember, I told it to also count grade. So I've got 199 ninth graders, 112 of them happen to be male. Okay? Notice that, in fact, because I am counting both grade and gender, those pieces of information don't appear out here. They don't appear in the output. They only appear in the headers. Okay? So a very, very simple report that lets me do aggregation. Nice to have, simple to make. Now, got 15 minutes left in my presentation today. Now we're doing the really cool stuff. I was so impressed when I was actually in Edmonton when they showed me how this stuff works. This next part of this is worth the price of admission. You can, out of our software, without using anything else, you can create pie charts, you can create bar graphs, you can create pivot tables. It is way cool. And I will show you just a couple of very simple chart reports and a pivot table reports. The choices I show you today are going to be for simple reports, but these same principles apply if you make a more complicated report. I want grade and gender pie. Okay, I mean, I name these for a reason. This is a pie chart, and it is a district-wide report. Okay, now, here on the front page, the key thing I've done on the front page is I've told the computer I want to make a chart, okay, as opposed to either a pivot table or a report. Field area, here are the elements I've chosen to report on. Notice homeschool is in here, but I'm not going to put it on my report. I want homeschool in there because I'm going to sort by that. Okay. I'm going to actually sort by grade and then by gender. I only want kids from my high school because it makes the report run faster. Now, Here's where the rubber meets the road. Here's where you got to make some choices because we are going to make a report chart. The chart series and chart categories, if you are mathematical majors, you probably know what series and category are. I just know that one is the x-axis and one is the y-axis, or expressed even more simplistically, one is vertical and one is horizontal. What kind of chart are we going to make? We're going to make, look, I've got about 10 choices here. I can make column reports. I can make bar reports. I'm going to make a pie report. And I'm not going to only make a pie report. I'm going to make an exploded pie report. And don't worry about calling the Secret Service guys back because exploded pie has nothing to do with ordnance. So I'm going to say I want gender up the one side. I want grade down the other side. The most important choice I make out here is data field. In other words, what am I going to count? I'm going to organize my count by grade. I'm going to organize my count by gender, but what is it that I'm counting? I'm counting the ID number. In other words, each kid individually. I probably don't want to come in here and pick, let's say, last name, because if I got 17 Pattersons, then my report is mucky. It's not accurate. It's not giving me what I want. So pick a unique field to count by. And we'll look in a minute about 3D effects and not 3D effects, but I kind of want to quit talking here. I'm going to click Finish. I want to show you the output because the output is really, really cool. I'm going to get a pie chart. Okay, here's my pie chart. Let me move this guy. And what we're seeing here, let me bump this up a little bit in size. At the bottom, I have my color coding. Blue is 9th grade. I've got 87 9th graders. I've got 10 females. Really? Grade 10 females. You got it. This is hard. It's hard to read the first time through it. Blue is 9th grade females. Green is 10th grade females. Purple is 11th grade females, and orange is 12th grade females. I've got 9th grade females, then I have to read it the other way. 9th grade males are dark blue, 10th grade males, 11th grade males, 12th grade males. Okay, an exploded pie chart. Exploded simply means I pulled the pieces apart, and I've got a nice little content down here that shows me what's what, and then up here I've got the actual numbers. So I got 112 what? I got 112 9th grade males. Okay? Now, let's think about the practical implication of this report, because you know what I can do with this report? I can come in here and I can copy this image, and then I can paste it into Microsoft Word. Then in Microsoft Word, I can write a little report that explains the chart, and I can give that to my manager, and they will be happy for the rest of the afternoon. You make 2 or 3 of these reports, secretaries out there that are listening to me right now, you make 2 or 3 of these reports, you hand them into your principal or somebody up the chain of command, they will leave you alone for the rest of the day, and you can get your real work done. It's way cool. It's way cool that I can copy this report and paste it into something else like Word and have it work. And then you can do something else with it. Okay, I wanted to show you what was 3D versus not 3D. Let's just scoot back here to that very end, and I'm going to say, show me it not 3D. By the way, there's a whole bunch of percentages there that you get to pick. You can pick, for instance, 0 is God's eye. This is a God's eye view, okay, looking down from the top. You can put that on its side. You can pick 45-degree angles. You can do all sorts of really interesting charts and graphs at different angles and different views. But I just wanted to show you here that this is what you're going to get if you don't pick 3D. I'm going to argue that the other one was more visually interesting. And now I want to show you the pivot table, because the pivot table is pretty cool. Up front, I make the choice not report, but pivot report. And then I scoot out here to my defining area, and that's right here. Okay? Now, Do I want to count or do I want to sum? I'm going to count. Again, I've got rows and columns. I want gender to be rows. I want my grade to be column. And what am I going to count? In Excel, I believe this is called data. In our product, it's called detail. Okay? Again, I pick a unique item. ID number is unique among my students. I am going to count my students, and I'm going to break that up by gender and by grade. Because really, all of one of these guys, and by one of these guys I mean a pivot table, all a pivot table really is some piece of information broken down by something, and in my case it's broken down by two things. Now check this out. Okay? Here's my pivot table. I have grades across the top, as I said I would have, and I have gender down the side, as I said I would have. If I read the table left to right, look, I've got 87 9th grade females, 89 10th grade females, 89 11th grade females. So left to right, I'm reading gender. Oh, by the way, in my whole school, I have 347 females. I have 385 males. I can also read the chart downwards. I can go 87 plus 112 is what? 199. I've got 199 ninth graders. Okay? So I can read the pivot table either way. You can break down almost anything by almost anything. I could do, for instance, instead of gender, maybe I would have ethnicity. And you can look at your enrollment by ethnicity. Go back in your mind and think about the chart I showed you before, the pie chart, right? You could show by ethnicity what piece of the pie do your various ethnicities hold in your enrollment pool at your school, right? You can do grade distribution reports. Think about that for a minute, okay? I can do A, B, C, D. I could break that down by grade, by gender, by ethnicity. I can do lots of different things with pivot tables and with bar graphs, and I can do them right in SchoolLogic. I don't have to go somewhere else. So let's review. What did we talk about today? The front end, we talked about user-defined groups. We talked about creating them. Why do we create user-defined groups? We create them when the stock groups that come from my developers, things like currently enrolled, grade level, homeroom, when they don't do it for me, I create user-defined groups. We had talked about user-defined group security. We talked about user-defined reports a ton, okay? We started there with the security for user-defined reports. We talked about aggregation. That's where I get the user-defined report to count my kids. Bar groups and pie charts. We talked about those at the very, very end. I didn't show you a bar graph, but I showed you a couple of different pie charts. Bar graphs look like what you think they look like. And, oh, by the way, just like these guys, you can copy and paste them and dump them in Word and do all sorts of marvelous things with them. And then we've got our old pal, the pivot table. We showed you those guys at the very, very end, okay? Pivot tables, nice to have. Guys, I don't want you guys to end up in the ditch. I want your headwinds to be minimal. I want your trails to be smooth. That's why we take the time to do these, and I hope you find them at least a little bit helpful. As usual, if you wish to review this presentation later, or maybe you want to share this presentation with a coworker who couldn't make it today, wait until Monday or so. Today's Thursday. I'll probably put it up on the internet over the weekend. This is where I put them on the internet. I always put them in the same place, community.schoollogic.com. You know where to find them. Hey, thanks for coming out today. I hope you found this a little bit helpful. I hope you folks all have a terrific afternoon. Thank you so much on behalf of SchoolLogic.